After 5,000 hours of mindfulness practice, you began to see improvements in cellular markers, for in
Mm.
aging, which means, and the way I read it is that there's a little bit of reverse aging going on at that real
Yes.
molecular biological level, right? You start to recover some of that which you've lost, but it takes, a lot of hours to do that.
Hmm.
So those kinds. It's just like if you have a stroke, right, or if you have an injury to your arm, if you practice and work on it, then it's going to get stronger and you're going to recover. The same thing
Right.
happens, in the body and these real small molecular sort of cellular systems too, as well. So,
So you're naming a couple of things. One of them is this generational trauma that can
right,
get passed on a genetic level. Genes can upregulate or downregulate, and that's that's the power of choosing to create healing. And that's what you're mentioning is like, oh, even though if we have these passed on, what if there's something we can do? And the research is showing even 5,000 hours to create change, but on a genetic level. But I wonder even if even less hours can create other forms of changes, because some listeners may go, 5,000 hours, how am I
right.
going to get to
Yeah.
5,000 hours?
Mm.
But did they mention also other markers in terms of
Oh,
change?
yeah, yeah. I mean, some of the research I've seen goes down to like 20 minutes, half an hour. Doing things can begin to kind of stimulate, healing in the body. Even like there's research I was looking at where people do self hugs. You don't get
Oh
enough
yeah.
hugs, so you do self
Yes.
hugs. That's been looked at too. And even a self hug for like 2 minutes, close your eyes, hug yourself, hold yourself
Mhm.
tight, can begin to create a change in the body and the brain, a
Mm.
rise in the dopamine, the reward chemical, a rise in serotonin in the body, a
Mm.
rise in oxytocin, bonding, caring for myself kind of
Mm.
stuff, which those all send thrive signals to the brain, to the body, just with a self hug. And that research has been done, not a lot, but I've been reading some of it where it's like,
Yeah.
wow, it doesn't even take much. But then, you roll into like 100 hours of practice, you're going to find you're going to have better emotional regulations. You
Mm.
go and start getting better, a sense of introception, what's going on in my body, how am I feeling, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, and then as you move on to 1,000 hours, you find out that you get more changes, better emotional regulation, greater awareness and focus, much reduced activity in the amygdala, the fear, fight, flight part of your brain,
Mm.
and also I think when you're getting some of these hours in, like 1,000 hours, a person can get that in 2 years, thousand
Yeah.
hours of practice, and you could even do it in a year if you really dedicated yourself to doing like 3 hours a day of practice, hour
Yeah.
and a half early in the morning and a half an hour in the afternoon, then an hour in the evening or whatever it takes, to get that,
Mm.
but there's some other research too that shows that if you start getting into this 1,000 hour sort of kind of range and past that, there's a
Mhm.
part in the brain called the nucleus accumbens, which
Mm.
is part of the brain, and it's actually a kind of a circuit of that. But that part, kind of does many things. One of the things it does code for is like me, self. And
Right.
there's a guy by the neuroscientist, great neuroscientist by the name of Andrew Newberg, who's kind of done some research in this area.
Mhm.
And his research was, as I believe, was talking about how the nucleus accumbens, after so many hours of practice, begins to shrink. So
Mm.
identification with yourself begins to get less and less, and identification with the world around you gets stronger and stronger.
Ah.
So if you're talking about, people who've done a lot of practice, like Indigenous people who have been out in the land, meditating on the river, meditating on the mountains and the skies and the stars, that as they accumulate all this practice, probably
Mm.
what's happening in their brain, like so many other, spiritual leaders around the world, the nucleus accumbens starts to shrink, and it's no
Mm.
longer, it's like about me, it's about me. It becomes, you know, it's about us, and it's about
Yeah.
everything. So we get a stronger connection with that, right? Which is when you talk about the Buddha. That's what happened to the
Mm.
Buddha when he, found enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. He sat there for all this period of time, and then all of a sudden, there was enlightenment. And one of the first things that he could see was on this blade of grass, this droplet of water. He could see the ocean
Mm.
in this drop, right? And then the drop in the ocean. And he could, when Mara came back to tempt him and say, there's no way you're going to find enlightenment. What the Buddha did was he reached down and he touched the earth as a witness, right?
Mm.
So that was his connection to that. So I think, at that point, his nucleus accumbens, it was probably shrinking and saying,
Yes.
it's not about me, it's about the connection that everything is out there. So these are some of the
Mm.
things that, brain imaging and neurobiology has discovered, with mindfulness practices and contemplative practices. So
Mm.
it's really quite fascinating. And I'm really I've really spent a lot of time looking at Indigenous people's contemplative practices to try to gauge using sort of the Western brain imaging and science now to kind of say, wow, this is probably what was going on when these people were doing the ceremony with a tree or with a river. And as they did it for long periods of time over many, many years, this is why they believed the river was alive. This is why they
Mm.
believed that the forest had sentience. This is why they
Mm.
believed that, they were connected to the stars, because they could actually feel that. Now what we understand when people do these research brain imaging studies on Buddhist monks or nuns or
Yes.
others have done many many hours when they have this spiritual experience. This is what's happening. They're
Mm.
getting a connection to everything, and they're transcending. There's this transcendence
Yeah.
above that experience. Which again, then stress is no longer a part of that. They've overcome that sort of thing, and they see the larger, bigger picture. Something to which I've been thinking
Mm.
about might be akin to the use of psychedelic medicine. Which
Mm.
kind of helps a person expand their understanding and their consciousness that wow, things are connected. Yeah.
Yeah. Hello there, and thank you so much for stopping by this channel. I hope you find this content useful, and if you do, feel free to hit that subscribe button. It will really help me to reach to more people and keep this content going. Here we are journeying together, and let's see where this takes us.